Elena stared at the crystalline structures forming beneath her brother's skin, a chill spreading through her body despite the hospital room's regulated warmth. She withdrew a portable scanner from her bag, technically prohibited equipment now, and passed it over Marco's arm. The display confirmed her suspicions. The structures weren't native to human biology. They were engineered, artificial, transmitting something. Data, genetic information. The medical scans have been far more invasive than anyone realized. Dr. Rice, visitation period has concluded, announced the melodic voice of the ascendancy mediator at the door. The tall, crystalline being's faceted surface reflected the room's stereo lighting in patterns too perfect to be natural. "My brother just died," Elena said, not looking up. "I'm entitled to time for grief protocols." She used their clinical terminology deliberately. "Grief is inefficient," the mediator replied. "The designated representative will be processed according to ascendancy health standards. All genetic material will be properly archived." The word struck Elena like physical blows. Processed. Archived. "I need to accompany his body," she insisted, still recording data with her concealed scanner. "That violates new protocol. Deceased specimens must be examined for environmental contaminants before release." The mediator's crystalline form shifted slightly, facets realigning in what Elena had come to recognize as their equivalent of impatience. Specimens, that's what her brother was to them, what all humans were. "You said the restrictions on my research were for our protection," Elena said, finally looking up at the alien being. "My brother would be alive if you'd allowed me to continue." The mediator's surface rippled with blues and purples, their communication spectrum. "Your species lacks the maturity to direct its own evolution. The genetic therapy you propose would have introduced instabilities in the human genome. Dangerous instabilities." "You mean unpredictable ones," Elena countered. "Ones you couldn't control." The mediator moved closer, towering over her. "Dr. Rice, your continued resistance to ascendancy guidance has been noted. Further noncompliance will result in reduction of your research privileges." Elena laughed bitterly. "What research? You've restricted everything that matters." "For your protection," the mediator repeated, the phrase now familiar to every human on Earth after 5 years of ascendancy presence. When the alien finally left, Elena quickly extracted samples from Marco's arm, concealing them in medical waste containers that would trigger fewer security scans. As she worked, tears streamed down her face, genuine grief mingled with calculated deception. Later that night, in her apartment overlooking Geneva's transformed skyline, now dotted with crystalline ascendancy structures that allegedly purified Earth's atmosphere, Elena examined the samples under her smuggled microscope. The crystalline structures weren't just collecting data, they were altering the surrounding cells. Subtle changes, nearly undetectable, but with her specialized training, Elena could see the implications. The modifications would cascade through generations, affecting neural pathways associated with creativity, innovation, and resistance to authority. "Marco," she whispered to her brother's memory, "they're changing us." Her secure communication device, black market technology from the fledgling resistance, chimed softly. The message was brief. "Opportunity available for continued research. Off-world. High risk. Reply within 12 hours." Elena looked at the sample again, then at the night sky, where the faint shimmer of the forbidden horizons was sometimes visible on clear nights, humanity's new cage. She had nothing left to lose. The unregistered shuttle bucked violently as Captain Chen pushed it through the debris field at speeds that should have torn the hull apart. Elena clutched her harness, knuckles white, watching Chen's hands dance across the manual controls. A rarity in itself since most ships now ran on ascendancy-approved navigation systems. "You fly like you want to die, Captain," she shouted over the groaning metal. Chen flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Not before they do." He jerked the controls, narrowly avoiding a tumbling asteroid fragment. His prosthetic left arm moved with inhuman precision, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Elena had heard the rumors about Chen, former UN Space Force ace pilot, lost his arm during the first Ascendancy demonstration, now ran the most successful smuggling operation in the belt, specializing in forbidden tech and scientists the aliens had blacklisted. The pursuing Ascendancy patrol vessel's signal finally faded from their sensors. Only then did Chen ease back, letting the shuttle drift into the shadow of a larger asteroid. "They're getting better at tracking us," he said, rubbing his temple where the neural interface connected. "That's the third patrol this month in supposedly uninhabited sectors." Helena examined the crate of equipment they'd barely managed to secure. Genetic sequencers and quantum processors that would have been standard research tools before the Ascendancy arrived. "This won't be enough," she said. "The crystalline structures I found are like nothing I've seen before. They operate on principles beyond our current understanding." Chen's eyes narrowed. "But not beyond your understanding, right? That's why Dr. Okafor requested you specifically. Flattery doesn't suit you, Captain." "Not flattery, Doctor. Desperation." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing where his prosthetic merged with flesh. Around the connection point, familiar crystalline formations glinted under his skin. "These appeared 6 months ago. They're spreading. I'm not the only one." Elena moved closer, professional detachment giving way to horrified fascination. "May I?" He nodded, and she took his arm, examining the interface. The crystalline structures were more advanced than those she'd seen in her brother, actively integrating with Chen's neural pathways. "How much can you feel through the prosthetic?" she asked. "Everything," he replied. "Better than my real arm." That's how they sell it. Superior technology, better integration, enhanced capabilities. What they don't mention is that it works both ways. They can feel through me. Elena's eyes widened. "You're compromised." "Was," he corrected, tapping a small device attached to his neural port. "Dr. Okafor's quantum dampener blocks their access, but I still get the benefits." The shuttle's proximity alarm blipped once. "Their signal to approach Europa base." "Why did you show me this?" Elena asked as Chen reactivated the engines. "Because when we reach Europa, you'll see dozens more like me. The Ascendancy isn't just watching us. They're plugging in. The question is, why do they need direct neural access to humans?" As they approached Europa's ice-covered surface, a hidden hangar door slid open, revealing a bustling underground facility carved into the moon's subsurface ocean. Inside, Dr. Imani Okafor waited, a tall woman with intricate scarification patterns visible on her temples, marking her as a quantum physicist from the African Scientific Collective. Behind her stood a group of 30 or more people, many with visible prosthetics or medical implants similar to Chen's. "Welcome to Blind Spot Base, Dr. Reyes," Okafor said. "You're looking at the only humans in the solar system the Ascendancy can't monitor in real time. And we need you to figure out why they want inside our heads so badly." Elena's breath condensed in the frigid air of Europa's subsurface lab as she stared at the holographic projection. The Ascendancy's genetic manipulation wasn't subtle. It was precise, elegant, and terrifying. "It's a cascading modification," she explained to Dr. Okafor, who stood silently beside her. "It doesn't just alter one generation. It compounds across multiple generations, with each change laying groundwork for the next." The lab door hissed open as Chen entered, his face ashen. Behind him, 2 resistance members carried a body bag. "Sato didn't make it," he said flatly. "Ascendancy inspection at the Ganymede relay. They claimed routine health screening, but he collapsed minutes after their scan." Elena felt a cold weight in her stomach. "I need to examine him immediately." As she worked, the pattern became unmistakable. The crystalline structures in Seto's body were more advanced than any she'd seen, actively reconfiguring neural pathways in his brain. "They targeted his limbic system," she said, looking up from the microscope. "Specifically the areas associated with independence and defiance. But something went wrong. The modifications happened too rapidly. They're getting impatient," Okafor observed, accelerating their timeline. Chen slammed his prosthetic fist into the wall, leaving a dent in the metal. Why? What's the endgame? Turn us all into docile pets. Elena returned to the genetic sequencer, comparing Sato's samples with the data from Chen's arm and her brother's tissues. Not pets, she said finally. Tools. The modifications enhance certain cognitive functions while suppressing others. They're optimizing us. For what purpose? Okafor asked. Before Elena could answer, the lab's secure terminal lit up with an incoming transmission. Chen's team had succeeded in their raid on the Ascendancy communication hub. The data was fragmented, much of it in the aliens' crystalline language that defied conventional translation. But scattered throughout were references to humans. Variant K7, high evolutionary volatility, aggressive innovation cycle, requires containment. They're afraid of us, Chen said, scrolling through the fragments. Of what we might become. Elena's attention caught on a series of dates, periodic reset events for previous K variants. With growing horror, she pulled up Earth's geological record, overlaying extinction events. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, the Permian-Triassic, the Late Devonian. They align perfectly with these reset dates, she whispered. They've been here before. Multiple times. Cultivating us, Okafor suggested, like a crop. Elena shook her head, the pieces finally falling into place. More like an experiment. They're running evolutionary trials, letting intelligence develop, then wiping the slate when the results don't suit them. She pointed to the final line of data. And were designated as a problematic variant, too unpredictable, too innovative. They're not just containing us. They're preparing for another reset. Chen's face hardened. How long do we have? Elena studied the construction schedules referenced in the data. The solar modulation structures they're building. They're not for optimizing solar radiation as they claimed. They're terraforming apparatus designed to alter Earth's atmosphere at a fundamental level. She looked up, eyes wide. Months, not years. Okafor moved to the secure terminal, fingers flying across the interface. We need to evacuate our outer bases, consolidate our resources. If they're accelerating, we need to respond in kind. Evacuation won't be enough. Elena said, her mind racing through possibilities. We need to fight back on their level, the genetic level. If they can rewrite our code, we need to rewrite ourselves first. The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. You're talking about directed human evolution, Okafor said finally. That crosses every ethical line we've established. Those lines were drawn before we knew we were being harvested, Chen countered. What's your proposal, Doctor? Elena met his gaze unflinchingly. Project Prometheus. We steal fire from the gods. The emergency council aboard Chen's stealth vessel dissolved into chaos as Elena outlined Project Prometheus. You're proposing we become what we're fighting against, argued Takumi Sato, Yuji's brother, his voice raw with grief. Genetic manipulation on a mass scale. It makes us no better than them. It makes us survivors, countered Dmitry Volkov, a former Russian bioengineer. The Ascendancy isn't offering negotiations. The ship's proximity alarm blared, cutting through the debate. Chen lunged for the controls as 3 Ascendancy vessels materialized seemingly from nowhere, their crystalline hulls refracting light in impossible patterns. They've cracked our stealth tech, Chen shouted. Evasive action. Now. What followed was pandemonium. The resistance ship broke apart under concentrated energy weapons. Elena found herself sealed in an emergency pod with Chen, debris slamming against the reinforced viewport as they plummeted toward Titan's cloud-covered surface. They knew exactly where we were, Chen said, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead as he fought the pod's manual controls. We've been compromised. The pod crashed through Titan's thick atmosphere, heat shields barely containing the friction as they descended toward the methane seas. At the last moment, Chen managed to adjust their trajectory, skidding across a rocky shoreline before slamming into an abandoned mining facility. Hours later, Elena regained consciousness in near darkness, the pod's emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Chen had dragged her inside the facility despite his own injuries, his prosthetic arm now hanging limp at his side. "Communications are down," he said when he saw she was awake, "and I had to disable my arm. The Ascendancy tech was actively broadcasting our location." Elena moved gingerly, assessing her injuries, painful but non-critical. "Anyone else make it?" Chen's silence was answer enough. As they explored the facility by emergency light, Elena realized it wasn't abandoned at all. It had been converted. Mining equipment had been repurposed into sophisticated research apparatus, and the walls were lined with sample containers holding what appeared to be human genetic material. "It's an Ascendancy lab," Chen whispered. "Automated, no on-site supervisors." Elena approached one of the terminals, which activated at her proximity. To her surprise, it displayed information in human-readable format. "They're not even bothering to hide it here," she said. They'd been experimenting with human DNA, trying to isolate specific traits. "Which ones?" "Creativity, adaptability, abstract thinking." Elena scrolled through the data. "They're trying to understand what makes humans unpredictable." Chen examined the equipment around them. "Can we use any of this for your project?" Elena surveyed the lab with newfound determination. "It's better than anything we had on Europa. If we can establish secure communications with any surviving cells, we might actually have a chance." Using components from their crashed pod and Chen's expertise with Ascendancy tech, they cobbled together a quantum transmitter that exploited the same blind spots Dr. Okafor had identified. To their relief, scattered resistance groups responded, decimated but not destroyed. That night, as Chen slept fitfully, Elena prepared the first Prometheus protocol, a genetic modification designed to counteract the Ascendancy's tampering. The test subject would be herself. "You can't," Chen said, waking to find her programming the automated injection system. "It could kill you." "If it does, use my data to refine it," she replied, already rolling up her sleeve. "We're out of options." The injection burned like liquid fire in her veins. As Elena collapsed, consciousness fading, she experienced a strange sensation, as if the very fabric of reality around her had suddenly become visible, the Ascendancy's energy fields and monitoring systems appearing as tangible, manipulable structures. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that she could see the cage humanity had been placed in, and where its weaknesses lay. Elena woke to a transformed world. The sterile lab walls now pulsed with invisible data streams that she could somehow perceive, flowing information that reminded her of neural pathways. She sat up too quickly, gasping as her enhanced senses overwhelmed her. "Easy," Chen said, appearing beside her. His voice created ripples in the air, sound visualized as color and texture. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." She focused on his face, anchoring herself in his familiar features. "The modification worked," she whispered. "Too well. I can see everything." "Define everything," he said, his scientific curiosity battling with obvious concern. Elena gestured at the wall. "Ascendancy monitoring fields. Data transmission. Energy signatures." She pointed to his disabled prosthetic arm. "I can see how it interfaces with your nervous system, and how they designed it to collect data from you." Chen stared at her changed eyes, now flecked with crystalline patterns that caught the light. "Can you control it?" "This perception." "I'm learning," she said, closing her eyes and focusing inward. When she opened them again, the overwhelming sensory input had dimmed to manageable levels. "It's adjustable, like tuning an instrument." Over the next week, Elena documented her transformation while continuing to refine the Prometheus protocol. Her modified cells were developing structures similar to the Ascendancy's crystalline technologies, but under her control rather than theirs. "It's not just sensory enhancement," she explained as Chen examined her latest blood samples. The modifications are creating new neural pathways, connections that shouldn't be possible in human physiology. Chen set down the microscope, his expression unreadable. You're becoming something else. I'm becoming what we need to be, Alina countered. The Ascendancy has engineered countless species across thousands of worlds. We're using their own methods against them. The tension between them had grown alongside Alina's abilities. Chen watched her with a mixture of awe and apprehension as she learned to manipulate small Ascendancy devices with mere thought, interfacing directly with their crystalline structures. Let me show you something, Alina said one evening, taking his hand. The contact sent a jolt of awareness between them. She could sense his bioelectric field, the rhythm of his thoughts. She led him to the facility's observation dome. Titan's methane clouds parted occasionally to reveal Saturn hanging massive in the sky, its rings catching distant sunlight. Look, she said, directing his gaze not upward but across the methane sea to a distant structure they hadn't noticed before. What is that? Chen asked, squinting. Alina amplified her vision, the structure resolving into clarity. It's older than the mining facility. Much older. She described the weathered edifice, clearly artificial, but unlike Ascendancy architecture. I think it predates their arrival in our system. Another species, or previous variants, Alina suggested. Evidence that someone else resisted. Their discovery was interrupted by an alert from their makeshift communications array. The message came from Helena Vasquez, a resistance leader they'd worked with before the attack. Thank God you're alive, Vasquez's holographic form said. We've established a new base in the Krakenmare region. We need to coordinate. Alina raised her hand, suddenly wary. Something in Vasquez's energy signature felt wrong. Altered. Chen, she whispered. She's been modified. Not like me. She's carrying Ascendancy signatures. They exchanged a glance of mutual understanding as Alina cut the transmission. We've been found, Chen said grimly. No, Alina corrected. We've been betrayed. The ancient structure loomed before them, half submerged in Titan's methane sea. They'd abandoned the mining facility hours after Vasquez's transmission, traversing the frigid landscape in environmental suits modified with Ascendancy tech that Alina could now manipulate. It's responding to me, Alina said as they approached the weathered edifice. Patterns etched into its surface began to glow faintly, not with light, but with energy signatures only she could perceive. What language is that? Chen asked, studying symbols that resembled neither human writing nor Ascendancy crystalline code. It's not language as we understand it, Alina replied, her modified eyes tracking energy flows through the structure. It's pure information topology, mathematical relationships encoded directly. She placed her palm against a recessed panel. The massive door, silent for perhaps millions of years, slid open with surprising smoothness. Inside, they discovered a chamber that defied human architectural principles. Spaces folded into themselves, creating dimensions that seemed to extend beyond the building's exterior confines. At the center stood a device Alina immediately recognized despite never having seen anything like it before. It's a resonance amplifier, she breathed, but more advanced than what the Ascendancy is building. Chen approached cautiously. Built by whom? By us, Alina said, certainty flooding her altered consciousness. By variant K6 or K5, a previous iteration that got further than we did. As she interfaced with the ancient technology, images flooded her mind, memories not her own, preserved in the structure's systems. She saw previous human civilizations rising, developing technologies beyond what modern humans had achieved. And then the Ascendancy arrivals, the resets, the starting over. The Ascendancy didn't create this technology, she said, pulling back, gasping. They appropriated it. The crystalline interfaces, the genetic manipulation. They stole it all from previous variants they destroyed. Chen steadied her. Why? If they're so advanced. They're not innovators, Alina interrupted. They're preservers, curators. They harvest the creativity of other species because they can't generate it themselves. She gestured at the incredible complexity around them. This is what they fear, that will outpace them again. Working through the night, they adapted the ancient technology to complete Alina's work on the Prometheus protocol. Chen watched as she synthesized a viral vector that could spread the modifications throughout the human population, lying dormant until activated. "You need to take it too," Alina said finally, holding up a vial of the completed modification. "If I'm compromised." "If you're compromised, I'm already dead," Chen replied bluntly. He studied her metamorphosing features, the crystalline patterns now visible across her skin, her altered eyes. "Will I become like you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "The process seems to adapt to the individual. Your experience might be different." Chen took a deep breath and extended his arm. "Do it." The transformation was immediate and violent. Chen collapsed, convulsing as the modifications rewrote his physiology. Alina held him, monitoring his vital signs with her enhanced perception, until he finally stilled. When he opened his eyes, she saw the change immediately, not just in the physical manifestations, but in his consciousness, now perceiving dimensions of reality previously invisible. "I can see," he whispered, voice raw. "But it's different. Not like yours." He reached out, not with his hand but with his mind, connecting directly to the ancient systems around them. "I can reach beyond." Alina watched in amazement as Chen's consciousness seemed to expand, stretching toward something vast she could sense but not quite access. "The ascendancy," he gasped. "I can see their network. They're collective. They're preparing something." His face contorted in pain and urgency. "Alina, they're not just reducing the sun's output. They're planning to trigger a solar flare that will wipe out all unshielded technology on Earth. A purge," Alina realized. "They've detected enough of our modifications to implement containment protocols." "We don't have months," Chen said, his consciousness snapping back to his body with visible effort. "We have weeks. Maybe days." Alina moved through the crowded streets of New Shanghai, her appearance masked by a commercially available dermal overlay that hid the crystalline patterns beneath. Everywhere she looked, she saw the ascendancy's influence. Energy fields connecting implanted humans to monitoring stations, nanoscale crystalline structures embedded in food, water, and air. 6 years of ascendancy presence had transformed human society beyond recognition. Citizens lined up voluntarily for wellness scans that implanted monitoring nodes. Children attended enrichment centers, where subtle neurological conditioning reinforced compliance. Most disturbing were the advocates, humans who had undergone extensive ascendancy modification and now preached the aliens' doctrine with religious fervor. "The path of ascension is open to all who submit to guidance," announced an advocate from a floating platform in the city center. The woman's body was a hybrid of human and crystalline technology, beautiful and terrifying. "Today's blessing brings us one step closer to joining the collective harmony." Alina felt the pulse of transmitted data as people around her received the blessing. A wireless download that further altered brain chemistry to enhance dopamine release when following ascendancy directives. She slipped into an environmental control center, her falsified credentials passing inspection. The security guard's eyes glazed over as she subtly manipulated the energy field around his implants, a new skill she had developed during the journey from Titan. Once inside, she accessed the central system, inserting the specialized delivery mechanism she and Chen had created. The Prometheus vector would spread through environmental filtration systems across Asia, lying dormant until activated. 30 seconds until security protocol activation, warned the system as she worked. Alina's enhanced reflexes raced against the countdown, her fingers interfacing directly with the crystalline technology. "Upload complete," she whispered as she withdrew, seconds before security drones swept the area. Outside, she activated her quantum communicator, connecting to Chen, who was orchestrating similar infiltrations across Europe. "Asia distribution network seeded," she reported. "Confirmed," came his response, Africa and Europe as well. What's the status of our unwitting allies? Elena glanced skyward where she could perceive the faint disturbance in the forbidden horizons. Moving into position. The disruption from the K6 technology is creating micro-fractures in the barrier. For weeks, they had used the ancient technology from Titan to transmit a signal to the stars, a desperate call for help aimed at other species contained by similar forbidden horizons. They had no way of knowing if anyone was listening, but Chen's expanded consciousness had detected faint responses, whispers from other caged civilizations. An emergency broadcast interrupted her thoughts, projecting onto every available surface. ATT Intellion. Hazardous solar activity. DETCTD. All citizens. REPORT2AC in DNCY Protection Centers. IMEDAPOI. Elena's heart raced. They're moving up the timeline. Get to the extraction point, Chen urged through the communicator. If we're not in position when they trigger the flare. His voice cut off as a massive ascendancy ship descended over New Shanghai, its crystalline hull pulsing with energy patterns that Elena recognized as weapon systems. Citizens of Earth, announced an ascendancy primary, its message translated into all human languages simultaneously. Contaminants have been detected in your population. For your protection, we must implement purification protocols. The streets erupted in panic as people fled toward designated shelters. Elena moved against the flow, her enhanced perception allowing her to navigate the chaos. She sensed more than saw the smaller ascendancy vessels deploying around the city, containment units preparing for mass collection of humans. They're not protecting anyone. She transmitted to all resistance frequencies. They're harvesting the compliant and eliminating the rest. At the extraction point, an abandoned quantum research facility, Elena found not her contact, but Helena Vasquez waiting. Did you really think we wouldn't track your transmission pattern? Vasquez asked, her eyes reflecting the same crystalline structure as an advocate's. The ascendancy saved me, Elena. They can save you too. Elena sensed the trap closing around her as ascendancy enforcers surrounded the building. There was no escape, unless she activated the Prometheus protocol prematurely, with only a fraction of the population seated. Now, Chen, she whispered into the communicator. We have no choice. The activation signal pulsed outward from Elena's position, propagating through quantum entanglement rather than conventional electromagnetic waves. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, the dormant Prometheus vector awakened in millions of humans simultaneously. Vasquez crumpled to the floor, her ascendancy implants shorting out as her body began its transformation. Outside, civilians staggered and fell, then rose again with new awareness dawning in their eyes. What have you done? Gasped an ascendancy enforcer as its control fields dissipated, crystalline structures fracturing under the assault of newly empowered human minds. Elena didn't answer. She pushed past the confused aliens, their technology suddenly unreliable in her presence. In the sky above, the massive ascendancy command ship flared with emergency protocols, its symmetry disrupted by cascading failures. Across the globe, modified humans discovered abilities manifesting in unique ways. Some developed Elena's perception of energy fields, others Chen's expanded consciousness. Many found themselves instinctively manipulating ascendancy technology, turning the aliens' own systems against them. In orbit, Chen led a hastily assembled fleet of retrofitted human vessels against the ascendancy's solar manipulation stations. His consciousness stretched between his physical form and the network of modified humans below, coordinating their efforts with impossible precision. They're attempting to trigger the solar flare manually, he transmitted. We can't stop it completely. Elena reached a public broadcast center, overwhelming its security through direct neural interface. She connected to the global network, her face appearing on every screen worldwide. People of Earth, she began, what you're experiencing is your birthright. Abilities the ascendancy has suppressed through countless cycles of human evolution. They fear us because we've surpassed them before, and they know we'll do it again." As she spoke, the sky darkened ominously. The Ascendancy had managed to trigger a partial solar event, though not at full strength. Electromagnetic disruption cascaded through unshielded systems, but the modified humans instinctively generated protective fields around critical infrastructure. "We need to synchronize," Elena instructed. "Focus on the forbidden horizons. Together, we can break their containment." Millions of newly transformed minds turned their attention skyward, perceiving for the first time the energy barrier that had imprisoned humanity. As they focused their collective will, microscopic fractures in the barrier expanded. In space, Chen's consciousness detected something beyond the weakening barrier. Other presences, other minds, waiting. "Elena," he transmitted, "we're not alone." The Ascendancy Primary's voice thundered across all frequencies. "This variant will be terminated. The key protocol will be reset as it has been 7 times before." Their remaining ships converged, combining into a weapon of unimaginable power aimed at Earth. Chen's fleet moved to intercept but would never reach it in time. In that moment of crisis, the fractures in the forbidden horizons suddenly expanded. Through the gaps poured vessels of designs unlike anything humanity had seen, yet somehow familiar, resonating with the ancient technology from Titan. "Variant K7," came a new voice, neither human nor Ascendancy. "We have awaited your awakening." The newcomers' ships formed a protective barrier around Earth, their technology easily countering the Ascendancy weapon. Elena sensed their communication. They were representatives of civilizations that had escaped Ascendancy control generations ago, descendants of previous variants who had been monitoring humanity's progress from beyond the barriers. "The curators have controlled this sector for millennia," their leader explained as the Ascendancy forces retreated. "They harvest innovation because they cannot create. You are the first to successfully break their control from within." As the forbidden horizons dissolved completely, Elena stood at the broadcast center, watching humanity's first glimpse of the true cosmos. Filled not with Ascendancy outposts but with diverse civilizations, many evolved from Earth life seeded across the stars by previous escapees. Chen's consciousness returned to his body as he docked at the broadcast center. When he and Elena embraced, they sensed something new forming between them, a shared awareness that extended beyond their individual perceptions. "What happens now?" asked a voice from the crowd that had gathered. "What are we becoming?" Elena smiled, the crystalline patterns beneath her skin now proudly visible. "What we were always meant to be. The horizon is no longer forbidden." Above them, the stars beckoned with possibilities no Ascendancy could contain.